The fact that there's a tool out there that lets you sell something for millions of dollars in gains and you can actually defer those taxes and keep the money working for you. I love talking about it and telling people about it and helping them keep more of their money.
Welcome back. Hey, I'm joined with Daniel from Deferred. He's the head of growth and partnership, and he's going to be talking about all the cool things that they're doing to help people to save money on 1031 and do smart tax strategies. Daniel, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I work at Deferred. We're a qualified intermediary for 1031 exchanges. Tell you a little bit about my background. I got my master's in accounting and CPA, worked at Deloitte for 5 years, then entered the startup space. And since then, our founding group has completed 3 startups, 2 successful exits, and then we raised the seed round to start Deferred.com to try to modernize and democratize 1031s to everyone.
That's a great background. Curious, from a human level, what gets you excited? Why do you love this industry? Why do you love what you do so much? How are you helping change people's lives?
Yeah, that's a good question. Funnily enough, even though I'm a CPA, I focused on the financial statement and audit side. And then I learned about 1031s when we were starting this company and we stumbled into it and we learned about what an amazing generational wealth hack it is. I just love educating people on it. The fact that there's a tool out there that lets you sell something for millions of dollars in gains and you can actually defer those taxes and keep the money working for you. I love talking about it and telling people about it and helping them keep more of their money.
Do you feel like most people know about this?
I think a lot of people actually don't know about it. The IRS used to actually track 1031 data. I think they stopped in like 2016 or something. It was like 9% of transactions that qualify to do an exchange, only 9% did it. And that seems crazy low considering the benefits. I don't think a lot of people actually know about the 1031. And then I think a lot of people are shocked to find out it's been in the tax code for over 100 years.
What is stopping people from learning about it?
Yeah, most people probably think you have to be like a sophisticated or savvy investor or have like large portfolios. I think if you're not around it or you're not a real like investor, it's not something that you're actively seeking. If you're not actively seeking or searching for it, you're probably not going to run into it organically. And if you don't have the right advisors around you, if you don't have the right CPA who focuses on real estate, or if you don't have the right commercial real estate or residential broker who knows about 1031s, they might not tell you about it. You really need to have the right people surrounding you who are going to educate you. And then personally, like from my clients, we have a lot of people who bought property 20 years ago and are now their properties are worth a lot more. They're kind of mom and pop and they never were investors and now they have this huge asset that they can sell and keep and make it work for them.
That's awesome. Is there a minimum that people have to have in order to make this viable?
That's like a common misconception that I tell people is they think it's only for large deals, but I was telling you that we've done a $30,000 land deal in South Carolina, and that person had an $8,000 gain. And their viewpoint was, that's my $8,000. I don't want it going to the government. They did a 1031. They deferred the tax bill and they kept all their money and put it into another land deal.
I'm curious. I've heard that 1031s has a high percentage of failure because there's really stringent timelines, 45 and 180 days. There's all these rules to identify and all this stuff. Does that kill a lot of deals?
On our end, like 92% of our exchanges are actually successful. For us, we don't see that failure. I think mainly it's because people are proactive and we're very upfront about the timelines. And so when someone comes to us, we tell them right away, hey, these are the 45 and 180 day timelines. There's nothing stopping you from going to go look at what you want to buy now. You can start putting offers in and there's nothing stopping you. You don't have to actually sell the property before going after purchasing something.
That makes a lot of sense. So the more proactive, the better you are.
Honestly, people just have a huge incentive to get it done, so they typically find a way to get it done.
What are some mistakes that people make that you see that could have been avoided?
There's a lot. One of my least favorite is someone who calls me, and I had 4 of these in a week, like 2 weeks ago, but they call me and they're like, hey, I want to set up an exchange. I just sold my property last week, or I just closed yesterday. That stinks because the person really wanted to do the exchange and had the right intentions, and no one told them you had to have a QI in place first. Everyone always talks about the 2 timelines. I say there's 3. The first is you have to have a QI engaged and an exchange agreement in place before you actually close. One of the other more frustrating ones, not for me, but for people, is they think you only have to reinvest a gain. They think you get to pull your basis out since you're only taxed on gains. but you actually have to reinvest your net sale price. If you have a large sale price and maybe a smaller gain, that can be pretty jarring to hear.
That first criteria makes a lot of sense. Unpack that and the reason why somebody has to have a QI and they just can't do it themselves.
The IRS came up with this idea of constructive receipt. If you're going to be doing a 1031 exchange, you cannot have constructive receipt of the funds. Some people take that as meaning you can't physically touch the money. I have people who call me and say, hey, it's in escrow, I haven't touched it. But it means that you can't control the funds. So if you've closed, you've taken on property, like you have control of where that money can go. You need to have the exchange agreement that outlines the constructive receipt rules and the exchange rules and your agreement with the QI in place before closing. You're not taking title. It goes along with the IRS requirements of the safe harbor exchange. And essentially a safe harbor exchange just means the IRS is like, okay, we're not going to bug you. You follow the rules. Part of the safe harbor is using a QI. And one other just goes into the QI and common mistakes is some people say, I'm just going to use my attorney. I'm going to use my CPA. I'll use the title person. The whole point of a QI is it's considered a qualified agent. If you use your CPA or your attorney or anyone that's you've paid services for within the last 2 years, they're considered a disqualified agent. As little sense as it makes, of course, the people you want holding your money, it's a huge deal. It's a big transaction. You want to use your attorney. You want to use your CPA. You actually can't. They're disqualified agents. And that's the whole reason you have to use a qualified intermediary.
You guys do things differently than all the other QIs. I'm curious for you to unpack and to a little showboat, talk about why Defer is so great.
I think we've taken something that's almost a commoditized business, right? Like every good QI is going to keep your funds secure. They're going to get you a compliant exchange. Outside of that, they might talk about their history or their expertise, but there's not much separate. We learned that there's not a lot of software out there. And then we also learned that QIs don't actually make their money from the fee. So QIs will charge you on average $1,200 to do an exchange, but most don't tell you where they make 80% of their revenue is on the float. So when you do an exchange, we talked about the constructive receipt. At sale, you don't get the money. It goes to the QI's account. And a good QI is going to set up a segregated FDIC insured bank account for your exchange. That's what we do. It's a bank account. Like any bank account, it earns interest. We do a lot of large commercial deals. On a $5 million deal held for 90 days, for context, I would earn 50 grand in interest. So a QI is sitting there saying, hey, it's $1,200. They're saying, yeah, it's $1,200, but they're putting away this idea of like all this interest. They're not talking to you about it. What we've done differently is we don't charge any fees. We think everyone should try a 1031. I told you that 9% number earlier of only 9% do one, even with all the benefits. So we want everyone to be able to start an exchange and try one with risk-free. We don't charge any fees. And then the other thing we do is we actually pay the client to share the interest earned. If their proceeds are over $1 million, they'll actually get paid to defer their taxes, which is pretty cool. Then what allows us to do all this is the software we created. We spent 14 months creating the software. Typical exchange officers spend a lot of their day manually inputting tasks, inputting data and updating documents. I can start an exchange in 9 minutes. And for most of our exchange officers, with a click of the button, a lot of the exchanges are already set up and ready to go. And they're spending their time on the phone with customers, actually talking strategy and answering questions.
Wow, that's a huge benefit. So do you see a lot of repeat customers where they're saving a ton of money instead of that $1,200 each pop? It's like they're savings, plus they're earning interest. That seems like a win-win.
It's really sticky, especially because our software too, like we have the only online portal where a client can log in, see where their exchange is at, what their deadlines are, where their documents are, schedule time with their exchange officer, see what tasks they have to do. And once you go from like having all this transparency and click of the button to, you don't want to go back to just doing everything over email.
That makes a lot of sense. There's so much that we could get into. Any final takeaways?
I would say if you're selling an investment property, you should heavily consider a 1031 exchange. Always talk to your CPA first to see if it makes sense. You could talk to us, but I think a lot of people think they're scary, and it certainly can be, and it can get complex. Most exchanges are really straightforward. You're selling an investment property, you're buying an investment property, and you have a few timelines to think about. I really just try to simplify it, but work with a good QI, work with a good CPA, and you'll be in good hands.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on, and this is awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for having me.